Hello, class. Week 6 wrap up. It's getting close to the end. I'm going to be trying to shorten these videos. 20 minutes is too long, so I'm going to strive to make these a bit more palatable. So here we go. India and China, and how to compare the safeguards compared to ICH, GCP guidelines, gaps. This with the former, or I guess the week 6 was all about. And basically, simply put, both countries have have adequate regulations in place to address these issues. The problem is enforcement. Why there's a problem with enforcement? I know that especially China, and I'm sure that India is doing the same thing. They're working to try to improve their image because right now there are concerns about quality issues of the data coming out of those two countries. Why that is far more complicated and way beyond the scope of this video. What is important is that you are aware of them. Choosing experienced sites can go a long ways. I spent 2 weeks going all over the southeast part of the United States, talking to physicians who were interested in beginning to become research sites. The one thing that every one of these physicians had in common was that the only thing they knew about research was how to spell research. Beyond that, they didn't know anything. If I put studies at those sites without somebody experienced there to help them set up and to go and deal with the day-to-day issues that are going to be occurring, they would make as much a mess of the data as any one of the sites in either China or India. So at least part of it, in my mind, is a training issue and helping them understand exactly what research is, how that differs from how patients differ from subjects, that sort of stuff. And just going back to absolute basics. We all were not born knowing what research was all about, and neither were they. So helping them out, again, that's a complicated issue and way beyond the scope of this. But understanding that there are training issues in both of these countries that need to be addressed, and how to do that, I'll be honest, I'm not quite sure. You would have to have some very experienced people there in the same way that I'll have to have experienced people at these sites for those that want to continue on here in the U.S. as well. Okay, that's moving on to assignment 1. I thought overall it was very good. Everybody pretty much basically chose some of the major topics, factors to be considered, and spoke on them, and for the most part spoke very well. Something that I think needs to be, something else that needs to be considered that wasn't as much chosen, that I thought should have more emphasis, was the importation, exportation, customs regulations. If you can't get your drug or your supplies in and out of that country in a timely manner, your study's going to go absolutely nowhere. So there needs to be a lot of thought put into that before you start reaching out to these sites. Some of these the procedures that need to take place to get sites set up, to get countries set up, some of them need to be done in parallel, of course, for timing reasons. But I would dissuade you of reaching out to sites before you have a full understanding of exactly what it takes to get a study in a given country. Because if it ends up being a no-go because of country regulations, in this case, import export licenses that need to be obtained, things that are going to end up sitting in customs for 6 weeks, that sort of thing, and that does exist. It's happened to me. You're going to have to, after reaching out to the physician, you're going to have to pull back, and you develop you don't want to develop ill will with these physicians, thinking that we were ill prepared and sort of circumvented some proper channels and proper steps before trying to get them set up for a given research study. Choosing experienced sites in these countries once you get past the import export. Oh, and before I forget, one of the things that you could do is, where possible, setting up depots within those countries, so that way you can have equipment and supplies sent into those depots, and then they get sent out from the depot and it's already in the country, rather than sending everything directly to the sites. That's an added expense, no question. A problem that I ran into that hopefully has been addressed in the years since I did it is that there was very poor accountability of supply levels within these depots. If I wanted to know how many drug kits were on site, I would literally have to call somebody who was at the depot. He would put the phone down and then go to the shelf and start counting, which if I order a pair of tube socks from Amazon, I know exactly where it is, where those socks are at any given time. But thousands and thousands of dollars worth of drug, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars worth of drug, has to be counted by some guy looking at a shelf. There's got to be a better way of keeping track of this things, because that's very time consuming and completely antiquated. So keep an eye, just be aware that that exists and something that you should probably address with your suppliers before everything is sent out. Choosing experienced sites, I think, is very important. Otherwise, you run into the problem that I described before with even sites in the U.S. and sites in India and China. They've got to have the experience because there are many things that we take for granted, having been in research for as long as we have, that will simply not be there with an inexperienced site or personnel, and they will just make a mess of your data. Last but not least is post-marketing. If your company plans to market a drug, or I should say, does not plan on marketing a drug in a given country, and you're going there to place a study and expect to get study subjects from those countries, let's just say for the sake of discussion, let's say you were going into China, but you didn't plan on marketing that drug in China, that's often against their regulations. You are only allowed to put studies in those countries if you plan on marketing within a set period of time after the study is completed, or after all of the studies are completed and it is made and it's approved. So that needs to be thought of and considered, and usually comes from something much higher than the study team, certainly with the companies I've worked with in the past. As you know, assignment 2 is due on the 15th. If you have any questions leading up to it, obviously it's still due in about 4 days. Please reach out to me. Feel free to text me because oftentimes if I'm running through airports or engaged in something else, I'm not going to be looking at my laptop. But certainly I would make an effort to do so if I get a text that there is a question pending. Otherwise, good luck, and we'll see you on the discussion board.